yeah, deformers are super cool. There's a bunch of them here. And I think the ones I've probably shown you, like the bend, the flare, the spline, the squash, and all this sort of stuff. And I can link you to videos that I can stick up on here that kind of go through this stuff because it's really useful. But the one I'm going to use here is the lattice. And the lattice, basically, if I go into there, it generates a cage around our object, but it's only generating a flat cage at the minute because it's only a flat plane. If this was a physical 3D shape, like this, we get a box around it because there's height and depth, but we don't get this with this one. So, but this this box is interactable. If I try and do my right click to select stuff, I only get 2 points. I only get lattice point and object mode. Lattice point is what I want, because what that'll give me, these little points around the edges that I can move, and it deforms the object. Now this is super cool, super cool. I've used this in the past to make something look like it's like I had a character running that had this like antenna on its head. I just modeled the antenna straight, and then I used a lattice deformer to make it look like it's kind of being bent back with the wind. They're super fun. But what you can do is inside our channel box here, we've got the S, T, and U value, which are basically just axes. And if we increase them, you can see where they're being increased. The T one's not going to work because that's the height one, so that one's not actually going to do anything. But the one that I want is, in this case anyway, is my S. I want my S to be changed to 1, like that. Because what's going to happen here is if I go to lattice point and I move it up, it gives me that shape that I want. It gives me that raised shape. And then when I'm done with that, I can just click on my object and then go to delete history. And it'll actually get rid of the lattice and just leave me with my geometry. And then I can give it some depth to the inside as well. Adjust it because it won't. What I just did then didn't give me a perfect shape, but it gave me something damn close to perfect. So then I can just go in there myself and change up some of the shapes to fit me. So like this, I want this to kind of come down a little bit. I don't know if it does on the reference. It doesn't look like it does it on the reference, but I'm kind of seeing it kind of little like dips down a little bit here, just a little bit. Just that. Just like that. And because obviously everything we're doing so far, we don't want any light bleed. I'd have to come in here and just bridge to fill these areas at the bottom. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, because we just want to make sure that we're not going to get any bleed. Oop. Oh my god, there's things in the way. There we go. So this stage is all about just doing the small stuff, doing a little bit of cleanup, and maybe re-looking at some areas. So stuff we did near the beginning, we might have to go back to it and go like, is there anything I can, without kind of redoing the entire thing, is there anything we can do to that one area to fix it up a bit? And when I say fix it up, I just mean like, clean up some of the topology maybe, or have a look at it now that there's more stuff in the scene. Does everything still make sense, like with depth and scale and stuff? Because now that we're starting to apply depth to stuff, it might be like, oh, that bit's actually far too deep, far too thick, or that bit's actually far too thin. Pardon me. Okay, and you can just bevel that. Maybe add one in there, like that. And this bevel here is literally just giving me a little bit of a curve just to help sell the impression that something's going to be coming through. Obviously, the pin's going to be coming through. Because then that's done. Obviously, we UV it first, and then we can duplicate it. Because that's used twice, I believe. Okay, this one looks a little bit longer than this one. So each one of these, in my eyes, look like they come from the same geometry, but it's slightly tweaked. So because we built this one off this hand, let's just take this over here. Let's rotate this one for now 180 degrees like that. So we got our three hands. Okay, so let's do this one. Like I said, this one looks like to be a bit longer, but this area looks to be pretty much identical. I don't think there's much difference in there. Maybe it's a little bit longer, a little bit elongated. So this is stupidly easy. As long as I don't affect the actual circle in the middle, this is very, very simple. I'm just going to grab everything from here upwards, center my pivot just at the bottom of the circle there, and just scale it forward like that. That's all we're going to do. So let's have a see. So that comes about halfway into this circle. Kind of it's gonna align with these dots, just like that. It looks a little bit wider, maybe, so I could go in there and just widen it out a tad, like that. But because we already preset up that sharp angle and stuff, that's all maintained. And because it's already UV'd as well, and because we're only going to be applying like a very basic texture to it, a very just shiny texture, it doesn't matter that we're stretching the UV a little bit. It really doesn't matter. And the last one is this one, the minute hand. Now this is very, very long and very thin as well. But same thing on this one. If I just grab all the different UVs going all the way down except for the actual circle itself. Where's my pivot point? Come over here, pivot point. Put that pivot point at the base of the circle. Like that. And then I'm just going to scale it forward so that it's pretty much coming up to the outside of this. Like that. And it does look very, very thin, like I said there. So I'll even just take this section in pretty much all the way like that. Boom. Done. And now let's rotate that back to 0 degrees. Oh, no, pivot point. So yeah, reset your pivot point, obviously. That's a silly thing for me to not do. Okay, pivot point there. And I'll do the same on this one. Because that pivot point's fine. Cool. So yeah, now I can rotate this back into place. Here we go. And pretty much the exact same thing for this one in the middle. However, this looks super, super thin. So what I would just do for this is pretty much go about the same thing. You don't need to do the lattice thing to make this sharp angle because it just looks like a flat piece. Make this piece with a circle in the middle, which you did easy, making the disc. I don't even think you need to put a hole in the middle for this one because it's a much smaller component. And if we look at this reference here, we can, it's pixelated, but we can kind of see the highlight around there. This one, not so much. So what we could do is literally just make a disc. Bring it in. Bring it to the center. I'm going to bring that poly, because this is a very basic shape, I'm just going to bring that poly count down to like that. Where does it go? There it is. top ones. Oh, this is just a big long stick. Big long stick to the top there. And these down here. Because like with everything, like everything I've discussed through this entire year so far, we're trying to find the basic shape of something to get as much information as we can through that basic shape before we need to go in there and start adding tons of different information, tons of new shapes and stuff. But yeah, these two smaller hands can be done just with this flat shape, and then because it does need to have a little bit of like 3D depth, we can just extrude. I said extrude, and then just lift it up a little bit to give it a tiny bit of depth, and that's it. And as long as obviously the pivot point, like build it with the pivot point being in the middle position, which is obviously perfect for that. And we're good, because everything else now, all this jazz around the outside, that's just texture work. This is obviously being built through those. These are dead simple to do. You know, we could create some of this stuff, obviously. We could just copy and paste a lot of this information from other places. So if we've got something, like for this like little face that's sticking through with these two purple eyes of the frame, if there's something inside this which fits it, why don't we just take something from this and place it here? We don't need to necessarily see what's going on underneath here, because we're not going to have anything. We're not going to explode the model and see inside there. Yeah. So that's basically what I want you to do today. That's what I'd like us to go through, so that we can start to unwrap this, which is a whole. Unfortunately, the unwrapping phase of this one is going to be a bit of a pain, because there's like a checklist we'll need to go through first, things we need to be aware of. But at this stage, it's just about making the basics, these basic shapes, and then starting to arrange everything into those groups, into those kind of elements. What I would also consider doing is any sort of display layers you've got, maybe either get rid of them all and start to remake them, or repurpose the ones you've got. If you've got some display layers here, get rid of anything you're not going to need besides the images inside the scene. If there's any geometry which you're not going to be using it, get rid of it, because we're going to be like cleaning up the scene now. We're going to be getting towards a point where we're actually going to be finishing off geometry. So clean up the scene. These display layers, we can think about adding elements of the objects, or other objects, to their specific display layer, so we can access them very quickly. Like the face can be its own display layer. Then all the hands, minus those, all the hands on top can be in their own display layer. These can be their own display layer. All the cogs can be their own display layer. This can be its own display layer. The straps can be their own display layer. So we're just organising everything, because the display layers are really good for obviously creating stuff, because then you can obviously be quite messy with them and be like, oh, I'm going to stick a bunch of stuff in there, and then I'm going to move it off to one side. I'm going to reference it out, so I'm not going to touch it, and I'll access it later on. But at this stage, because we're getting to the end, and we're going to need to have quick access, or clear, safe access to certain components, especially when you're UVing, it's good just to kind of have a nice, clear display layer set up. How do you feel? Because that was obviously a bunch of information. How do you feel about that?